Well, welcome to the show, Jenny. It's great to have you.
Good to be here, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So, you began your career studying organizational communication, and now you guide universities on AI and data strategy. What drew you to higher ed tech, and how has that academic foundation helped?
Well, it has been a little bit of a windy road from being a former academic researcher, a social science researcher, studying organizational communication, to my current role leading the education industry sector for Slalom. But when I look back, I think there are certain themes that make it make sense. And I think those themes are basically, experience, behavior, and strategy. So I was drawn to the study of organizations initially because I was really interested in the employee experience. So I used a variety of different methodologies, like survey methodology, and the process of writing my dissertation and getting my PhD. But then I realized that if I stayed in academia, I would probably have to do a lot of my studies and data collection using the population that was most easily available to me, which would have been undergraduates. And I really wanted to be inside of, larger organizations that have such an impact on so many people's daily lives.
Well, speaking of larger organizations, you are part of one of the most prestigious, high ed tech consulting firms, Slalom. And the education practice has posted a triple digit sales growth under your direction. So, what were the first moves that set that surge in motion?
Well, thanks, Jeff. Yes. Initially, upon stepping into this role as its first incumbent back in 2023, we did see really wonderful surge in growth to the tune of, as you said, triple digit growth in the first 12 months. And what I would attribute that to is a couple of things. One, to begin with the customer in mind, is I really advocated for a focus on personas, customer personas, buyer personas, to help the wider organization, right? So Slalom is full of technology consultants and business advisory consultants, and we're very expert at certain things like AWS, Microsoft, Google, and Salesforce, but not all of our practitioners are necessarily thinking strategically about higher ed and how do we grow that business. And so one of the engines of that initial growth was definitely trying to articulate, the different types of constituents that are within that environment. And then I would say the second big element or driver of that growth was getting really tightly linked and aligned with those partners of AWS, Microsoft, Google, and Salesforce. Because, that is the actual technology that we do a lot of our work on. So we're 100% services provider, and we are doing a lot of our customer service against those platforms. So wanting to get hooked up there.
Makes sense. I think you have such a great partner network. Many institutions that I talk to feel, AI ready is it's a moving target. What does that even mean? How do you assess readiness on a campus? What are the red flags? You tell a school to look for, and what isn't there yet?
So just can we pause for a second?
Yeah,
So I think I sent you like kind of a revised sort of like subset of your menu of questions. So I don't know if you have that or if you're
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
it feels like we might be looking at different things.
yeah. I have all those. I just didn't know like those are the only ones that you wanted to. I thought we'd emphasize those, but yeah, we can skip. We can move on.
I mean, like I can talk about it, but I was trying to kind of make a little bit of a flow so that sort of like each thing would kind of flow into the next thing. So I think I took maybe I did not understand what you sent
No,
me
let's
because
just
you
move
sort of
on.
this is like a
Because I
menu
want to
of
get to this
questions.
question about um I'm going to start here. So, Jenny, can you talk about the framework you've created with your approach to AI?
Absolutely. So I think that it's hard to find a leader in higher ed right now who is not being asked the question, what is our data and AI strategy, right? Organizations know they need to get more value out of their data. They know that they need to get from maybe proof of concept and different pilots that they're running right now to more scalable value. And so for us, the North Star that we use when it comes to data and AI strategy for higher ed is, of course, the strategic value. And we consider that like a destination. And then we consider AI, whether it is like old AI of machine learning or the now AI of generative AI, or the thing that's rapidly coming next, which is agentic AI. All of these things represent the engine. But if you think about like sort of the engine in a car, our approach is to say, to get all the way to your destination, you can't just have a car that only has an engine. You essentially need three additional things. So we use this metaphor of the car to say that to guide your journey, you need to have kind of a steering wheel. And that is the functional expertise of like, what is the department that this AI implementation needs to serve? So it could be a business function like human resources, or it could be an academic function, or it could be, something that's really unique to higher education, like admissions and enrollment. So you've got to have that understanding, that functional understanding to be the steering wheel. You also have to have a way to integrate, whether it's a large language model or reasoning engine, you have to have a way to integrate that into your systems of execution. So that could be your email automation platform. That could be your learning management system. That's an integration we're working on right now for one of our customers. And then the last thing you need is the gas for the car, and that's your data. So we say data is your fuel for the AI engine. So that's kind of the approach that we've created, is to make sure that we're bringing all of those things together. So you're not just looking at a pilot, but rather you are being able to get this new generation of technology to get you all the way to strategic value.
This is part of the reason I wanted you on this podcast, is because I saw that model, that diagram of the car metaphor, and it was really it made a lot of sense to me. So hopefully we can put a link to that in the show notes if that's published yet.
Yes, absolutely. We have it available for folks to look at on one of our articles on Slalom on Medium.
So what part? Imagine this car with the steering wheel and the the engine, and what part of the car are schools struggling with the most? What's missing?
I would say that it starts with a sense of overwhelm. I would say the first problem that we see very commonly is that there is an overwhelming amount of choices because you're being told, like, let's say you're a mission area owner, like let's say you lead student success or academic advisement or one of these functions, right? And you're being told that AI can do all the things and anything, right? And you might need all the data, right? And so the very first barrier that we see is this sense of overwhelm. So the way that we try to help our clients with that very first problem is to provide what we call a map of the territory, to really simplify a definition of strategic value that is specific to higher education. So we talk about, if we've got a big room of stakeholders representing multiple departments, we talk about type 1 strategic value, which is enhancing the inflow of resources into the university. Or there's type 2 strategic value, which is where you are improving the impact of spending those resources, right? So that could be like the efficiency of your accounts payable team, or that could be delivering more personalized student success supports to improve your year-over-year persistence rates, right? And so we try to simplify and then provide within each function a couple of simple models so that folks can say, hey, this is where it hurts the most. Like, this is where we have the most repetitive or inefficient processes where we have a human being that's swiveling between three screens, and can data and AI solve this for us? And so, like, once you clear away that problem of the overwhelm of choices and thinking you have to have all the data and all has to be perfect, you can actually unlock value very quickly.
That makes sense to me. What I'm curious, which Gen AI use case has surprised you the most in terms of measurable impact for students or faculty?
So we delivered a proof of concept last year for UCLA's business school, the Anderson School of Management, where we used kind of the car model that I just described to support their advancement team with alumni fundraising. And kind of like what I was saying before, we weren't going after the entire alumni engagement process. We really kind of called our shot and we said, okay, you have a reunion campaign going on where you are trying to engage these 3,000 alumni for whom 2024 is a reunion year. And so as a part of your existing sequence, let's do an A/B test between your current email solicitation in this sequence, where, this advancement team, they know what they're doing. They're already using best practices. They're already using a certain level of personalization. They're already using Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right? But let's see if we can double down on, number one, adding the engine of AI, which they were not using prior to our involvement. Secondly, doubling down on the steering wheel because we brought even more evidence-based fundraising best practices, like kind of out of my background of social science research and, sort of behavioral design. And then the integration to Salesforce Marketing Cloud, where we have a very deep and wide bench of talent. So they got more out of their existing platform. And then that gas, right? The fuel for the engine was making sure that we were leveraging some actually very readily accessible data that they weren't necessarily using in their sort of prior efforts. Bringing that all together, we were able to actually more than double fundraising outcomes from that single email.
Wow. Well, for the institutions who want to unlock results like that, what kind of data strategy do they need?
Well, I want to start by making sure we give credit to like all of your listeners in higher ed, because I'm sure they are already getting value out of their data to a certain extent, to a greater or lesser extent. And every institution already has some version of data strategy. So I think it's important to say that, our posture is not like, you're not currently doing data strategy, so you should start doing data strategy. Like, quite the opposite. We think that we conceive of data strategy as an iterative process, right? So you kind of are looping through strategy, execution, and enablement, right? And that moving through data strategy, data execution, and data enablement is iterative. And you're going to kind of run that cycle as the technology changes and as the demands of your organization and institutional mission shift, right? Like in the current environment, we certainly see a whole new set of challenges that data and AI need to solve in this present environment. And so I would say that within that, there's like two pieces of very good news. So one is that when you think about your data strategy, you don't need to dichotomize between centralized or decentralized. Those are not your only options. Because I think for a lot of higher ed, the right answer is going to be a federated model because it matches the reality and culture of higher ed being highly federated. So that simply means that you only centralize the things that really make sense to centralize, like maybe your purchasing power for one of these major cloud providers. And then for everything else, you can use a different organizing principle like data domains. So I think that's one piece of really good news on data strategy. And then I would just say the other piece of really good news is that, the new wave of agentic AI tools is going to allow both your sort of data savvy, but also your more like, your non-data practitioners to just like have a conversation with your data. And you can kind of achieve that like now and today.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that look at it, the way you're kind of describing it. Switching to something else, like kind of your background, you co-founded a startup that hacked online shopper psychology. What lessons from e-commerce conversion now inform student engagement strategies?
That's such a fascinating question, and I really appreciate you asking that, because the funny thing is that the whole like hacking shopper psychology initially all started with the same problem that we started with a minute ago, which was how do you get past overwhelm, right? Like how do you break out of analysis paralysis? And so the e-commerce startup that I founded, oh gosh, I guess over a decade ago now, was kind of based on some of these principles about what drives conversion. So I think what's really interesting is that higher ed can borrow more than just that lesson from e-commerce, right? So like understanding the paradox of choice is helpful, but there are a variety of e-commerce strategies that higher ed can use. And it's kind of interesting that this is an underinvested area, because if you think about it, you have a company, a shoe company, right, that is using all of these conversion tactics for a $50 sale or $150 sale. And higher ed is not yet necessarily hip to those campaigns or tactics, but you're talking about $50,000 of tuition for like a single year, but you're not using as sophisticated a tool set. So I'll just give one example. Like I talked about the paradox of choice and how to, and there are different techniques for that. But another great example is like running a comeback campaign. So one thing that e-commerce retailers know that is much cheaper and more efficient and more effective to get somebody who has already bought from you once to then buy from you a second time and then turn them into sort of a true customer, right? So they'll run like a comeback campaign. They know it's economically efficient to offer you, the one-time only customer, like a discount code or something like that. Some universities are using this notion, but there are also many universities that are not necessarily looking at, hey, we have a student that maybe, stopped coming back a year or two ago. Maybe we should go back and run a comeback campaign to that student. And even if something in their life means that they might no longer be a traditional four-year degree candidate, can we re-engage them through something online or a certificate program or something that's for working
Yeah.
adults, right?
I'm seeing that. Like I think you're talking about stop outs that like, hey, they've been here, but we need them to finish. And I'm even seeing continuing education divisions really ramping up their marketing efforts because the traditional younger students are harder to get now. So it kind of falls in line, I think, with what you're saying. It's pretty fascinating to me. But talking about conversions, we
Yes.
often feel these budget pressures, and it makes ROI the board's favorite acronym. Which metrics best prove the value of AI initiatives in year one versus year three?
So higher ed doesn't measure ROI in quite the same way, right? That commercial industries measure that. So I think we have to be a little more nuanced. Now, type one strategic value, which I alluded to before, which is the inflow of resources into the university, you can use more traditional measurement, right? So the value of your corporate partnerships, like if you're applying AI to sort of say, hey, how do we improve the productivity of our public-private partnerships, or how do we improve something like, fan ticket sales through our college athletics department, or how do we improve alumni giving, then you can use kind of very traditional measurements there. Type two strategic value oftentimes is more either efficiency of your business administrative functions or the effectiveness of your mission areas. And so for those, you will want to look at, obviously there are sort of the big ticket items of, your year over year persistence rates or your enrollment yield and those sorts of things. But you can also look at these more leading indicators before you sort of get to the ultimate, outcome measures, things like application abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what is your current rate of students starting your online application process and then leaving it unfinished? And can you move the needle there through some sort of application of data and AI? And so, like I said, it's a little more nuanced, but I think that has a lot of value, especially for institutions that are really looking to make sure that they are being open and inclusive to student profiles that might be first generation English learners or lower income.
You mentioned the application process. It makes me think of this company, Mutara. I've been following Mutara, who's reinventing the application process because it's kind of old fashioned. I know a lot of schools have the Common App now, and we have a shared experience, but like getting the smallest piece of data in the very first step, like I need your name, your email, and a couple things, and then treat it like a process rather than something that's going to take you a few hours in one sitting. And it's quite fascinating studying this user behavior from all these other industries. But I want to ask you, looking ahead 5 years, what campus job do you think will change the most because of AI, and why?
I think just about every campus job is going to have hopefully the benefit of AI. Like, I definitely don't think of it as humans or AI. I just think that we're all on a progression to humans assisted by AI. And we have a kind of specific taxonomy for agentic AI that kind of demonstrates that it's not binary, like I was saying before. It's not either the human has to do the final click or the human is completely out of the loop, right? But rather that in the day of whether that is a career counselor for a university, or whether that is the facilities manager for a university, or whether that is a teaching assistant for a university, right? No matter what is the job that you hold, that there will be different aspects of your workday 5 years from now where you are receiving higher or lower levels of assistance from AI as appropriate to the task. So like lower risk tasks, potentially much more independent automation. Things that are being escalated to you because they are more complex, or let's say it's a student having an emotional crisis or something like that, then it should immediately get that constituent or that student to a human being. And that's where you should be spending the majority of your time.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that take. I see it in my own daily activities already. Well, finally, I want to wrap it up with one last question. What book, podcast, or practice keeps you curious and inspired outside of work?
So I look to thought leadership that is talking about what I call the 5 to 9, right? The personal part of life. Because I think outside of business hours is where the competition for our attention is actually the most fierce. So I get inspired by best practices and principles that come out of fields like, entertainment, or other types of, like media and engagement. And I see that as really rich fodder for coming together then with the sort of the business part of the day, the 9 to 5. And I recently saw a really cool example of that. I got to experience a great example of that at Arizona State University, where they have a partnership with an immersive VR company called Dreamscape. So they're using something called Dreamscape Learn at ASU to do things like using VR headsets to teach biology and chemistry. And I got to actually experience one of their chemistry adventures.
Wow, that's cool. We just had Gemma Garcia from ASU on a couple weeks ago, so I'll have to check that
That's
out.
awesome.
Well, thanks for taking the time, Jennie. It was great to have you on, and we'll put links to your profile and Slalom in the show notes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. Anybody that wants to learn more about our approach to data and AI strategy for higher education, they can find the show notes and link to our article on Medium.
All right. Thanks, Jennie. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff.
Dr. Jennie Wong is the Global Industry Director for Education at Slalom, where she works with colleges and university clients around the world and leads AI and data strategy and implementation. Backed by a PhD in organizational communication from USC, Jennie helps institutions move from raw data to real-world impact, adding everything from secure research clouds to GenAI pilots for IT, faculty, alumni, and students. At Slalom, she's earned multiple Team Mogul awards for client delivery excellence and is the author of the recent article, Data Strategy for Higher Education, Fuel for the AI Engine. Her career spans talent management for Fortune 100 companies, a neuroscience-based e-commerce startup featured in TechCrunch, and a nationally syndicated entrepreneurship column. Recognized among 100 women of worth and top mompreneurs, Jennie pairs business acuity with a passion for teaching leaders. Her mantra is leading is teaching. When she's not advising campuses on AI readiness, you might find her mentoring rising tech talent or practicing her conversational Mandarin with occasional wine notes thanks to her sommelier coursework.